Our top story at the moment is about the Kashmir Files. Even as across the country, the imagination of people has been gripped by the horror of what happened over 3 decades ago. Now there is an overwhelming demand. The government must open the Kashmir Files.
Absolutely. In fact, this is a mega Times Now campaign. After all, time has not been a healer for them. After 32 years, the pain of being killed, tortured, hounded from their own homes is still raw for the victims of the 1990 Hindu genocide in Kashmir. As the community watched this film, Kashmir Files, many of them relived years of terror. In fact, there's just so many people I have heard, Meghna, of almost like this collective catharsis of families who went in to watch and came out in tears, completely overwhelmed, because it almost seemed as if decades of silence, a cloak of criminal silence, had finally been lifted. In fact, in just some of the stories that we are going to get for our viewers right now, there are men who are saying that their limbs were chopped off. There are women who are going to say how their husbands' bodies were thrown into the jail. There are those who say that they themselves were brutalized and were witness to horrors which were completely numbing. And these are not just testimonies. These are numbers, and numbers do not lie. Statistics that Times Now gets for you don't even begin to tell the story of the horror that an entire community was subjected to. In fact, let's get you a glimpse of these statistics. So sample some of this. For example, there are about 70,000 Hindu families who were forced to migrate from their own homes between 1990 and 92 alone. In fact, there were 215 cases of about 700 Hindus who were killed. However, as per the court's orders, none of these cases were reopened. Only 808 Hindu families live in the valley since 2010. That was the last rough count that was done. Less than 1,000 Hindu families. 209 killed since 1989. 109 in 1990. The worst year where any Kashmiri Hindu you speak to will talk about how there were loudspeakers that used to blare that we want Kashmiri Hindus to stay, but only the women. 147 cases registered, only 24 charge sheets filed. But all of these statistics, Meghna, really pale in the face of these first-hand testimonies. For 34 years, people have lived with these open wounds. Let's listen to how they narrate, even now, how nothing was done, no justice came their way.
और फिर चाकू गरम लगाया और ये पति के एक आंखें की पट्टी उठाया, वो इनको चाकू लगाया, ये लाइट भी खत्म हो गया.
Knife was pierced into my eyes. I lost my eyesight. Then they beat me so hard, pulled my tongue out and cut it with scissors. And then they threw me on the streets. My son had come to perform his mother's last rites. At 11 p.m., he was picked up and killed. I had to run away with my daughter-in-law and grandson. They used to remove processions, abuse our daughters, and humiliate us, and that's why we had to run away. My brother was called by some people. He went out. They started beating him. He screamed, shouted, but everyone shut their doors. He was shot by them. Bullets were fired at him, 4 in his stomach and the rest on his head. I went out and found him dead.
किडनैप किया था उनको. हमारे घर 3 आदमी आए थे सवेरे 10 बजे. फिर उन्होंने उनको बोला कि हमें बात बोलनी है आपसे, तो आप आ जाओ बाहर. फर्स्ट जून को उन्होंने पोस्टर लगाया.
My husband was kidnapped.
एक आदमी आया बोलने के लिए.
3 men came to our house at 10 in the morning. They took my husband outside.
लगाए थे. फिर उन्होंने बोला कि
after some time, we found a poster pasted on the door, on which it was written that we have killed your husband and thrown his body in the Jhelum river. We have still not found his body.
1967, I was in the college, and we had a girl, minor Hindu girl. Her name was Parmeshwari Hindu. She was abducted, converted to Islam, given the name Parveen Akhtar, and married after a Muslim boy. Now, amazing thing is that the state government did not do anything, but central government stayed silent also.
The most modern of Kashmiri Muslims started wearing hijabs. Boys started growing beards. We didn't think it would suddenly explode one day. Now they started to go and pee on Shivji's murti.
अपने पिताजी को किसी ने नंगा नहीं देखा, मैंने देखा। नंगा निकली, जगह जगह पे गोलियों के छेद थे। The worst part was there was a post-mortem done, starting from somewhere here all the way till there. Post-mortem करके सिला भी नहीं था ठीक से।
Well, in fact, let's go across to our panelists. Today, it's important for us that we are going to put out their stories, their voices, so that the entire conspiracy of silence, those who are still in denial today, have to accept the truth behind the Kashmir genocide. Joining us today on the show, Ashoke Pandit, a Kashmiri Pandit, as well as an Indian filmmaker. Major General G.D. Bakshi is joining us, a defense expert. There's also Renu Bhatt. The father was unfortunately killed during this genocide, one of the victims of it. Iqbal Dullu is joining us. He's an author as well. He's someone whose brother was unfortunately also shot dead. There's also Avinash Haiku, who's joining us here in the studios. He's unfortunately, his parents were victims of this genocide as well. There's Renu Bhatt, who's joining us, a Kashmiri Pandit of the genocide victim as well. Sanjeev Bagai, the doctor Sanjeev Bagai is joining us. He's of course someone who's deeply rooted in Kashmir and has witnessed some of this horror firsthand as well.
Avinash, I want to start by asking you, you know, I just feel with so many friends that we have in the Kashmiri Pandit community that every year when you have the anniversary of the genocide, there are these demands. Now there is this film. First, I want to ask you about the film. How is this different from every year when you ask for truth and reconciliation?
If you talk about the movie, that is the Kashmir Files, let me put it in a clear and a very precise statement on it. This is just the tip of the iceberg. This is not what actually has happened. It is just a tip of what people have seen. It is just probably, maybe, if you ask me, probably 1% or even less than that. Much more has happened to it, which has not even been, you know, that has never come to the notice of anybody, because it was a government-sponsored media. There was no social media. There were no private news channels. The only coverage that possibly could have come is from the DD, which is the local it's the mouthpiece of Indian government. And other than this, the local publications.
And there's that DD station as well.
Exactly. That has been the fact. And the matter of fact is, this was completely driven by, please correct me if I'm wrong, this was completely driven by the local administration, which was headed by the then CM Farooq Abdullah. And on top of that, he was, if not allowed, but not stopped by the central government here. That was one of the primary concerns. Exactly, that was one of the primary concerns here. Second thing, this is the same Farooq Abdullah and this is the same Indian government. Farooq Abdullah in 1971, when he was starting in London, he went on to meet the Amanatullah Khan, who is the founder of JKLF. In 1973, this very lesser number of people in India know, in 1973, Farooq Abdullah went to POK to take an oath to ensure that the Kashmir is liberated from India. But then again, he is becoming the CM. He is
But all of this is denied by the National Conference.
They'll go on to deny it. When migration happened in 19th January 1999, when all this happened, where was Farooq Abdullah? Why did he resign? Why did he stay in London for the next 10, 12 years and then came back to India and again wanted to be a part of the political mainframe? The reason is, he created a movement which was in fact led by his father, which is Sheikh Abdullah, and then went on to go in the mindset of people. They wanted to come out. The history of Kashmiri Hindus goes back to more than 5,000 years. And the Muslim, or we can say the Islam came to Kashmir in the 14th century only.
So you're saying what the movie shows is only tip of the iceberg. But
exactly.
Vinod Bhanji, you know, most of the criticism says that this is an exaggeration, that this is an attempt to try and create divisions between Kashmiri Hindus and Kashmiri Muslims. How do you view that criticism? Vinod Bhanji. I think Vinodji cannot hear us. Ashoke Pandit, what do you make of that? When the criticism is that this is an attempt to divide the two communities in Kashmir.
Well, Padmaja, good evening. Thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for your relentless effort to fight for Kashmiri Pandits always and for the country always. I would like to tell you that Kashmiri Pandits and Kashmiri Muslims in Kashmir were divided, especially during 1990 when we first suffered the worst genocide. So there is no two opinions on that, and I don't want to shy away, or I don't want to be very politically diplomatic about it. The majority community is responsible for my genocide, for my exodus, for my ethnic cleansing. There is no two opinions on that, because nobody spoke. Nobody tried to save us there during that time, the terrorism which had started from around 1984, 85, it started, and our selective killings that happened. So there is no two opinions on that. Divide. If you say this film is dividing, then let's understand we have already divided when the day, especially when we were killings, our killings happened, targeted killings happened of us, and they told us that we are not required here in Kashmir. So when they told us that you're not required here in Kashmir, you vacate Kashmir, that division had already started. So the film cannot divide the two communities. So let us not be on a wrong pretext, Padmaja.
Renu Bhatt, one quick word from you. I'm so sorry, we are running out of time, so we are going to quickly get some more voices. Renu Bhatt, it's been 32 years since you lost your father during the genocide. Today, when there are movies being made, there are platitudes being given, does it hurt somewhere that till date it's still called the Kashmiri migration or the Kashmiri exodus? Officially, it's still not called a genocide or a pogrom.
Yeah, hi, this is Renu. This is a very painful and shocking. This pain will remain in our heart. This pain will never go. But I just do my regards and hats off to this guy, Vivek Agnihotri ji and these people get this brutal of the Kashmiri Pandits in front of the world, and because of this people are knowing the stories of the Kashmiris now. But at that time, I was just 10 to 11-year-old, even I don't remember all the things. But the day when I heard that my father was hanged with a tree, his forehead was burned with the cigarettes, that pain I can never forget. That pain will remain in our heart, in my mom's heart, in my brother's heart. That is so painless that we people know. Nobody was knowing this story. Nobody was knowing. There are thousands, hundreds of stories like this. Not only my father, there were several persons. In this story, it has shown. At least the world is knowing now what was happened in Kashmir with the Kashmiri Pandits.
Well, this is something that Avinash was also saying. What the film has projected is perhaps just 1%. It's not about this film, which is why here on Times Now we've launched a sustained campaign to reopen the Kashmir Files. In fact, we are going to be slipping into a short break. We are going to return and get you more voices of these victims, because it's important that today, no longer should India deny the kind of ordeal that they were forced to endure in their own homelands. Stay tuned to Times Now.
Welcome back. Today is about stories. You've seen a film. Now it's very important to see the faces. There are so many stories which we in the cities don't get to hear, because unfortunately for us, it never reflected in popular culture. These are people for whom this is not a film. It's their life. And they are here with us on Times Now today. With Mr. Vinod Bhan, when you see the film, if you've seen the film, did you see any part of your life in it?
See, there have been many incidents, but the incident which took place at my home, it was January 1990. My uncle was killed. So without any reason, without any clarification, but only clarification which they gave that time was he was working in the CID department. So he was killed while he was traveling in a bus on the point blank. But even then, they didn't stop there. So we had only doctor in our locality by the name of Dr. Rajnath.
Well, there seems to be a bit of a problem there. We'll try and reconnect. Mr. Iqbal Dulu is also there with us. He's, of course, an author, but also his brother was shot dead. It's been 32 years, Mr. Dulu. Do you think that time has been a healer, or do you think your emotions, the hurt, the pain, it's still raw?
No, the pain is still raw. We have not forgotten anything. In fact, every moment of our life we are reliving it. The man, my brother, was a retired official. He was shot dead outside his own home. A bullet was fired in his throat, and then nobody was allowed to touch the body. And then the BSF took the body and cremated it without any family member accompanying. Now, when we speak of 1990, it was a horrendous period of time, riddled with pain and anxiety and fear. Every day there was a killing of an innocent chap. It started with the murder of Mr. Tikalal Taplu, who was the veteran BJP leader, in autumn of 1989, and then went on to take the murders of other innocent people, like the Radio Kashmir director, Mr. Lassa Kaul, the session judge, Mr. Anand Ganju, so on and so forth. Somebody was labeled as an infidel, somebody was labeled as an informer, and at will they committed these heinous crimes against humanity. And never was this truth relayed outside in the manner in which it was being done. All these things were wrapped up under the carpet. Thanks to our Agnihotri ji, who has brought some truth out through his movie, which is a phenomenal movie. We have relived once again all those moments which we didn't want to relive.
So we sincerely hope at
but
least...
But now the truth is unraveled. So more skeletons have to fall out of the cupboard.
Every single skeleton must be unearthed, and that's why we urge everyone to join our Times Now campaign.
Well, this of course is Times Now campaign to reopen the Kashmir Files. Stay tuned and do join our campaign. Welcome back. You're watching Explosive Exclusive here on Blueprint, and our Times Now campaign to reopen the Kashmir Files. That's going to be the focus. Over the last half an hour, we've been getting you voices of the real victims of the Hindu genocide. Till date, remember, it's not even been accepted officially as a genocide. It's merely being dismissed as the Hindu migration, which is why this conspiracy of silence must end. And today we are putting out voices and real stories here on Times Now, which are going to expose those who are still in denial.
Vittal Chaudhary, sir, when did you leave the valley and why?
I was only 6 when we left the valley. My father's name was put on the hit list on 25th of February. He was chased by a few terrorists. And on 26th morning, 26th February 1990, we left the valley for good.
Do you go back? Do you miss Kashmir?
Of course, I do. That's my home. But how do I go back is the question. You know, there has been no efforts, and every time somebody has tried to go back, they have been massacred. And the genocide of Kashmiri Hindus has not stopped in 1990. It has happened afterwards. It continues unabated.
Absolutely. In fact, Avinash, you wanted to come in. Give us a sense of your lasting impression of your last days in your own hometown in Kashmir.
I voice with Vittal on this. Vittal, as you said, your father was on the hit list. Let me put it across. When I left Kashmir, I was 15. And I'll share my part of the story, which probably was unknown till now. I was made to lead a procession. I'll repeat the words. I was made to lead a procession with my hands bound with the rope, and I was made to shout, हमको चाहिए आजादी, हक के लेंगे, लड़ के लेंगे आजादी, हक से लेंगे आजादी. I was made to lead a procession. My cousin, who is not in the India now, he still has extinguishing marks of cigarette butts on his arms, and I still have the nightmares. I still carry the nightmares even after 32 years of this. I still have the nightmares. What exactly I'm looking for? I still get up in the night thinking that what will happen to me? What would have happened to me had I still been a part of the Kashmir? Had I still been in the Kashmir itself? My rights. I have been deprived of my rights. I have been deprived of what I actually wanted as a citizen of this country. No voice from anybody. Nobody came up for the rescue. We were left off our own just for the simple reason we were a minority, we were a Kashmiri Hindus, and we were supposed to go through all this ordeal. Unfortunately for our system.
Lalit Ambadar, how will there be reconciliation then?
We are not looking forward to any reconciliation. You don't reconcile with the perpetrators of genocide. And you know what were the tools of genocide? Rape, murder, mass murder. Even children were not spared. Even infants were not spared. The Sangrampura massacre. One child was left there alive. And the jihadis were returning back, and suddenly this little baby cried. And the jihadi returned back and telling his boss, एक अधूरा काम रह गया है. Returns back and empties his AK-47 rifle into the small infant's head. You want us to reconcile with them? No. When these jihadis were looking for us with AK-47 rifles in their hands in the towns and streets of Kashmir, our neighbors, remember, Kashmiri Hindus are the aborigines of Kashmir. It's only over 700 years, over 700 years.
Absolutely.
There
can be no reconciliation after the trauma that they have faced, but can there at least be some semblance of justice and closure? In fact, let's quickly